Everyone mocked the beggar in the town square, but their laughter stopped the moment the prize bull followed him instead of the millionaire. What happens next will leave you speechless. The trumpet blasted through the hot afternoon air, sharp and commanding, and at once the arena in San Cordillo erupted with cheers. The great wooden gates creaked open and the bull burst forth like a storm. Its hooves pounded the packed earth, its dark coat glistened with sweat, and its horns gleamed like curved blades under the sun. Dust lifted in waves behind it as the beast thundered forward, ignoring the matador's red cape, ignoring the shouts, ignoring everything, until its eyes locked on Elias Vardez. Elias was hard to miss. He sat proudly in the front row, his gold-trimmed jacket shining brighter than anyone else's, his posture stiff with the kind of pride that came from knowing the crowd was watching him. For weeks he had boasted about this event, declaring it would prove San Cordillo's greatness, and, more importantly, his own. But now, as the bull's gaze fixed on him with an almost human intensity, a tremor of unease flickered across his face. The crowd gasped in unison, some men leaning forward with excitement while others gripped the edge of their seats. The matador snapped his cape again, desperate to regain the beast's attention, but it was useless. The bull tossed its head, snorted, and took a heavy step closer to the stands. Elias straightened, forcing a smug smile to his lips, though sweat already prickled along his temples. He waved at the beast as if mocking it, but his hand trembled slightly. And then, in an instant that no one expected, the bull turned. Its massive head swiveled, and instead of charging at Elias, it began to lumber toward the edge of the ring, toward a ragged figure pressed against the stone wall. Mateo Corrin had been shoved there minutes earlier, mocked by the guards and jeered by the men who thought him unworthy of standing among them. His clothes were nothing but patches of brown and gray, his sandals worn down to scraps. His hair clung to his forehead in greasy strands, and his gaunt frame seemed out of place amid the pomp of the arena. The beggar had hoped only to slip inside, maybe catch a glimpse of the fight, but the crowd had made sport of him. "Stay out, Shadow," they had laughed. "Don't stain our festival with your filth." Now he found himself frozen as the bull approached. The jeers grew louder, sharper, more cruel. "It's chosen him," one man bellowed, pointing with glee. "Run, beggar," another shouted, laughter cracking in his throat. Mateo's chest tightened as he stumbled backward, pressing his hands against the rough stone of the wall. His breath came in sharp bursts, his heart hammering so loudly he thought the beast could hear it. Yet the bull did not lower its horns. It did not snort with rage or paw at the earth like a predator ready to strike. Instead, it slowed, its massive sides heaving as it drew nearer, its eyes fixed on him in a way that was not hostile but searching. The guards hesitated, spears in hand. One leaned forward, uncertain. "Should we drive it away?" he asked, his voice wavering. The crowd shouted back conflicting answers. "Yes, kill it," some roared. Others, more curious than brave, yelled, "No, wait! Look at it! It follows him!" Mateo swallowed hard, his dry lips cracking as he whispered under his breath, "Why me?" I did nothing. His voice was nearly drowned by the shouts, but the bull's ears twitched as though it had heard him. The beast stopped just a step away, lowering its massive head. Dust swirled around its hooves. Mateo, trembling, raised one hand instinctively, palm outward, as if to push the danger back. To his astonishment, the bull grew still. Its breath came in heavy waves, warm and sharp with the scent of grass and sweat, but it did not advance. The laughter of the crowd faltered. Murmurs replaced jeers. "It's calm," one man muttered. "Why is it calm?" Elias leapt to his feet, his face burning with outrage. "This is nonsense," he shouted, his voice straining against the rumble of the crowd. "The beast is confused." Do not be fooled by this accident. But the people's eyes were no longer on Elias. They were on the beggar and the bull, standing together as though some invisible thread bound them. The matador, red cape limp at his side, could do nothing but stare. He had trained for years to command beasts like this, yet here stood a man who had not lifted a sword or waved a cloth, and still the bull obeyed. Mateo's legs wobbled beneath him, but slowly, carefully, he began to edge toward the gate. His instinct screamed at him to flee, to vanish into the crowd and escape this nightmare. Yet every step he took, the bull followed, not in anger, not in hunger, but in quiet, deliberate strides, its heavy hooves echoing like drums in the silence that had overtaken the arena. "Look at it!" a voice cried from the stands. "It walks with him!" The guards drew back, uncertain. No man wanted to be the one who challenged the strange connection forming before them. The air was thick, almost sacred, though none would dare to call it that aloud. Mateo's mind raced, torn between fear and bewilderment. Why him? Why not Elias, the wealthy patron of the fight? Why not the matador, the trained master of the ring? He had nothing, no strength, no wealth, no place. Yet here stood the bull, a creature bred for violence, following him as if he were its chosen master. Elias's fists clenched at his sides. His jaw tightened until his teeth ached. He could feel the power slipping from him, slipping into the hands of a man he had scorned, a man who was supposed to be nothing. The humiliation burned deeper than the sun overhead. "Enough of this!" Elias roared, his voice cracking. "Drive the animal back! Show these fools that this beggar is nothing but a trickster!" But the guards did not move. The bull, hearing the anger in Elias's tone, gave a deep snort and took another step closer to Matteo, pressing its flank protectively against the beggar's side. Dust swirled around them, golden in the sunlight, and the crowd sat frozen in a mixture of fear, awe, and disbelief. Matteo could hardly breathe. He glanced once at Elias, whose face was twisted with fury, and then back at the beast, whose dark eyes seemed to see something in him he could not yet understand. For the first time in years, Matteo felt the world's gaze shift. He was no longer invisible, no longer a shadow to be mocked and cast aside. Something had changed, something neither he nor Elias could control. The murmurs swelled again, no longer filled with laughter but with unease. Men shifted in their seats, whispering to each other, their voices carrying both curiosity and dread. The spectacle they had come to see had slipped beyond their expectations. Matteo stood in silence, his heart still racing, his palm still hovering in the air as though one wrong movement would shatter the fragile bond between himself and the beast. He had no answers, no plan, only the weight of a moment he could not explain. And in that silence, with the bull at his side and the eyes of the entire town upon him, Matteo felt the first shadow of destiny fall across his shoulders. He did not understand it, but he knew it could not be undone. Foreshadowing whispered in the air, this was no ordinary beast, and this was no ordinary day. Elias clenched his jaw, determined to reclaim the spectacle, not realizing that this moment would mark the beginning of his greatest humiliation. The whispers spread through the arena like fire racing along dry grass. Men leaned forward on the benches, murmuring to their neighbors, their voices carrying confusion and disbelief. "Why is the bull following the beggar?" one man muttered, gripping the wooden rail so tightly his knuckles turned white. Another shook his head in awe. It should have gone for the matador. Or Elias. Never for him. The sound of those hushed voices layered over the restless stamping of the bull, creating a strange tension that settled over the entire crowd. Elias Vardez rose from his seat, his face flushed, his jaw set in anger. He was not a man used to being ignored, least of all in front of an audience he had gathered himself. The bull had been meant to glorify him, to prove his power and wealth. Instead, the animal stood protectively near the beggar, a sight that made Elias's stomach twist. He barked at the handlers, waving a jeweled hand toward the arena. "Steer the beast back! Do you hear me? Drive it toward the matador!" The handlers obeyed, lowering their spears and stepping cautiously forward. They jabbed at the bull's flank, shouting to rattle it. The beast bellowed, its massive muscles tensing as it lunged toward them in fury. Dust exploded beneath its hooves as it charged, horns glinting in the harsh sunlight. The crowd roared in alarm, half rising from their seats as the men scrambled away. But then, as though pulled by an unseen tether, the bull froze. Its hooves dragged to a stop, dirt spraying, its chest heaving with heavy breaths. Matteo Corin, his knees shaking, had raised a trembling hand in front of him. His palm hovered uncertainly in the air, his arm stiff as if he barely controlled it. And in that instant, the bull calmed. Its head dipped slightly, and it stood still, snorting but no longer raging. The crowd's laughter, which had moments earlier been cruel and mocking, faded into an uneasy silence. Men looked at one another, their faces pale with confusion. "What trick is this?" a voice asked, but the question hung unanswered in the heavy air. Matteo himself was no less bewildered. His thin chest rose and fell rapidly, his eyes darting between the beast and the men surrounding the ring. Fear gripped him like cold iron, yet beneath it was something else, a memory. A field from long ago, his father's voice guiding him as they worked the land. His father, Thomas Corin, had never been a man of wealth, but he had been wise. "Respect them, Matteo," he had once said, holding a young bull's rope with steady hands. "They feel it. If you treat them like enemies, they'll always fight you. If you treat them with care, they may surprise you. That lesson, long buried under years of hunger and humiliation, now returned with startling clarity. Still, the arena was not ready to honor him. The uneasy silence broke as men began to shout again. "It's witchcraft," one called, pointing at Matteo. "He has bewitched the bull." Another spat onto the ground. "A trickster's game. He came to shame us." Elias seized on their anger, his voice rising above the din. "Do you not see? This beggar is sabotaging our fight. He dares to embarrass me in my own arena." His words carried like a whip, his tone sharp and commanding. The guards at the edge of the ring responded instantly, lowering their weapons and moving toward Matteo. Their boots crunched in the dust as they advanced, eyes narrowed with suspicion. Matteo's heart leapt into his throat. He raised both hands, backing away against the wall. "I've done nothing," he cried, his voice cracking. "I don't know why it follows me." Before the guards could reach him, the bull stepped forward. Its great head lowered, horns angled just enough to warn, not strike. The ground seemed to shake with its presence as it positioned itself between Matteo and the men. The guards froze, sweat glistening on their brows. One swallowed hard, his grip on the spear loosening. "If we move closer, it'll kill us," he whispered. The crowd erupted again, but this time not with laughter. It was awe mixed with fear, the kind of noise made when men realized they were witnessing something they could not explain. Eyes widened, breaths caught, and for the first time since the trumpet had sounded, the fight no longer belonged to the matador or to Elias. It belonged to the beggar and the beast. Matteo's legs trembled, but as he glanced at the bull standing guard before him, he felt a strange, reluctant courage stirring. This animal, fierce and unbroken, had chosen him. He had no idea why, yet the truth was undeniable. He straightened slightly, his thin shoulders no longer slumped as they always had been under the weight of shame. The eyes of the people were on him, not mocking, not dismissing, but waiting. The power had shifted, though few understood it fully. Matteo could feel it pressing on him, heavy and unfamiliar, and he realized with sudden clarity that he held something dangerous in his hands. Elias saw it too, and the recognition stung worse than a blade. His face reddened until it seemed his skin might tear, his fists clenching so tightly the rings on his fingers bit into his flesh. "This ends now," he spat, his voice shaking with rage. "Do you hear me? This spectacle is mine, not his." He turned to the crowd, spreading his arms wide. "Do not be deceived by a beggar's trick. He has fooled the beast, fooled your eyes, but he cannot fool me. I will prove to you that his charade is nothing." Matteo looked toward Elias, their eyes meeting across the arena. In Elias's glare he saw not just anger, but desperation. The millionaire could not bear to lose control, not here, not in front of these men whose respect he craved. Yet Matteo also saw something else in that gaze, fear. The guards hesitated, their loyalty torn between their patron's order and the primal warning of the bull's lowered horns. The handlers who had earlier jabbed their spears now lingered at the far end of the ring, unwilling to test the beast again. Even the matador, so proud when he had entered, stood with his cape slack in his hand, unsure whether to intervene. The silence stretched long, broken only by the bull's heavy breathing and the occasional cough from the stands. All eyes remained fixed on the strange tableau, the beggar pressed against the wall, the beast guarding him, and Elias trembling with fury in the sunlit seats. For the first time in his life, Matteo understood that he was not the powerless shadow they believed him to be. He did not know how to use this power, nor whether it would last beyond the moment, but it was his. And that realization filled him with both dread and wonder. The people were no longer laughing. They were waiting, torn between disbelief and awe. Elias, red with anger, swore he would prove this spectacle was his. He vowed to destroy both the bull and the beggar, not knowing that his arrogance was driving him toward his downfall. Dramatic irony filled the air. The audience expected Elias's dominance to return, but the stage was being set for something far greater than anyone imagined. The matador lunged. His polished blade gleamed in the sunlight as it cut the air, descending toward the bull's powerful shoulder. The crowd leaned forward as one, breath caught in their throats. For a heartbeat it seemed inevitable. The beast would fall, and the spectacle would end in blood, as so many others had before. But then a voice tore across the arena. "Stop!" Matteo hadn't planned it. The cry burst from him raw, instinctive, as though ripped straight from his chest. His voice echoed strangely in the stone walls, rising above the drums of hooves and the nervous murmurs of the crowd. Even the bull seemed to hear it. The massive creature jerked its head, muscles rippling, and twisted away from the strike at the very last second. The blade missed its mark. Instead, the matador stumbled, his arm meeting the full force of the bull's horn. A sickening sound followed, a tear of flesh, a cry of pain, and the man went sprawling across the sand, his crimson cape fluttering like a fallen flag. Gasps broke out across the stands. Men gripped the rails, some rising to their feet, while others drew back as though the beast might leap into the seats next. Elias, standing tall in his private box, felt the blood drain from his face. His lips, once curved in arrogance, twitched as though searching for words. "The beggar commands the beast," someone whispered from the crowd below. The phrase spread like a spark on dry grass. "The beggar commands the beast." Some voices trembled with fear, others with awe. A few men bowed their heads, uncertain whether they were witnessing a miracle or a curse. Mateo froze in the ring, his heart hammering so loudly he thought the others might hear it. His hands shook as he raised them, palms open, a plea for peace. "No! Please! I did not mean—" His voice cracked, but the bull turned its head toward him, calm, as though it had understood. Every eye fixed on him. The chants began, quiet at first, then swelling. His name, called by voices that had once mocked him. Mateo, the beggar. Mateo, the forgotten man of San Cordillo. Now, in their eyes, something more. But Mateo's knees weakened. He had never asked for this. His throat tightened as the truth clawed inside him. Whatever this was, whatever power or illusion the people believed in, it did not belong to him. It had chosen him, clung to him like an unshakable shadow. Above, Elias slammed his fist against the rail, his face twisting with rage. This was not how the story was meant to unfold. His show, his arena, his power, snatched away by a man who wore rags. Desperation burned through his veins. If he did not act, the city would remember this day not for his wealth, but for his humiliation. With sudden fury, Elias leapt from his seat. Gasps followed him as he vaulted over the barrier and dropped into the sand below. His silk robes, heavy with gold thread, dragged in the dirt as he straightened himself, lifting high a sword that glistened in the sun. The sword was beautiful, crafted with intricate designs that shimmered with wealth. But it was no weapon of war, more ornament than steel, more for show than survival. Elias gripped it with both hands, though his fingers trembled. "I will finish this," he bellowed, his voice straining to sound commanding, though it quivered at the edges. He glanced at the crowd, searching for their approval, convinced that bravery would earn him their cheers. The people went silent. Every gaze locked on the millionaire in the sand. Some admired his boldness, others whispered doubts. A golden sword was fine for ceremonies, but against a bull? Against fate itself? Mateo felt his chest tighten. "Elias, stop! You don't understand!" His voice was hoarse, desperate. He could see the madness in Elias's eyes, the need to reclaim control, to prove himself. But Elias did not stop. He charged. The sand flew under his boots as he closed the distance, his blade cutting through the air toward Mateo's chest. Mateo braced himself, rooted in place, the crowd screaming in anticipation. The bull moved. It surged forward like a storm unleashed, hooves tearing into the ground, horns flashing. In one crushing motion, it intercepted the swing. Metal shrieked as horn met gold, the sound ringing through the arena like thunder. The ornamental blade snapped, pieces scattering across the sand. Elias's eyes widened. His grip fell empty, useless. The force of the clash sent him sprawling backward, crashing onto his side in the dust. His silken robes, once so pristine, now clung to him with sweat and dirt. His chest heaved as he scrambled to sit up, his face pale with humiliation. The bull towered over him. Its breath steamed in the sunlight, its massive shadow swallowing his fallen form. The crowd held its breath. This was the moment they had come for, the beast striking down the arrogant master, blood paying for pride. But the bull did not attack. Slowly, deliberately, it turned away. Its great head lowered, and it walked toward Mateo once more, steady, obedient, as if tethered by some invisible thread that only he could hold. Elias sat in the dust, stunned, his broken weapon at his side. Then the noise began. Not laughter, not mockery, chants. "Mateo! Mateo!" They rose like a storm, men pounding their fists against the wooden rails, voices shaking the air. For the first time in his life, Mateo's name was not spoken with pity or cruelty, but with reverence. He stood at the center of the arena, the bull at his side, and the people of San Cordillo raised him higher with every cry. Mateo's chest rose and fell, but his heart was heavy. He felt no triumph. He had not earned this power. It had been thrust upon him, unwanted, dangerous. He looked at the bull, at the broken sword glittering in the sand, at Elias trembling in humiliation. The cheers echoed, but in his mind they sounded hollow. Because deep down, Mateo knew a truth that no chant could cover. Powers given so suddenly, so violently, always carried a price. And though he could not see it yet, he felt it already pressing against his shadow. In that moment, the beggar became a figure larger than himself. He was no longer the shadow of San Cordillo, but a man standing at the center of history. Still, beneath the cheers, Mateo felt a deep unease. He had not earned this power, and powers gifted so suddenly often came with a price. The night air was heavy over San Cordillo, carrying with it the restless murmur of change. The marketplace had gone quiet, the torches dimmed, but whispers of the beggar who commanded a bull still drifted from door to door. Mateo sat on the edge of the town, his hands resting against the rough wood of a fence, his eyes fixed on the silhouette of the great bull that grazed calmly beyond. Its horns caught the pale light of the moon, glowing faintly like a crown. The town might still doubt him, mock him, or even fear him, but here, by the animal's side, He felt no judgment, only truth. Yet truth carried weight. The same men who had once shoved coins at him with cruel laughter now offered him bread and meat with trembling hands. Farmers came with questions about their herds, bowing their heads in a respect Matteo was unprepared for. They looked at him as though he were a sage, as though his touch could tame even the wildest beast. He answered softly, humbly, though in his chest there lingered unease. He knew men were quick to change their tones, but not their hearts, and among them was Elias. The wealthy man's laughter had once rolled through San Cordillo like thunder, bold and unchallenged. Now it had vanished, replaced by silence sharp as a blade. His humiliation in the arena was not something his pride could swallow. He walked through the streets with clenched fists and eyes that burned with shame. The people saw it. Some pitied him, others sneered behind his back. But Elias's hatred found its target not in them, but in the beggar who had undone him. Rumors began to spread. Elias's voice, slick with venom, whispered into the ears of merchants and farmers. He claimed Matteo had not tamed the bull but summoned it, that the beast was no animal but a devil's creature, bound to a man who had traded his soul. "This will bring a curse upon us all," he said with trembling intensity, his face a mask of false concern. "The beggar's rise is not a blessing, it is a warning." Some men, weak of spirit, began to murmur agreement. At night, Matteo would pass houses and hear shutters close quickly, hear children pulled away from windows as if his shadow alone could poison them. Though the gifts of food and clothing continued, they came now with hesitation, offered with downcast eyes. He accepted them silently, his shoulders bowed beneath a burden he had never asked to carry. Still, he did not abandon the bull. The great beast lingered near him as though tied by an invisible rope, walking the edge of the town but never straying too far. At times, Matteo would sit with his back against the beast's massive side, feeling the steady rise and fall of its breath. In the quiet, it was as if the bull spoke without words, reminding him that loyalty was stronger than rumor and respect deeper than fear. But loyalty makes enemies of the envious. One night, when the moon was nothing more than a faint sliver above the hills, Elias gathered men in secret. They were rough men, hired hands with faces hidden in hoods and scarves. Coins clinked in Elias's palm as he promised them reward. "Strike the beast," he ordered, his voice low and furious. "End this farce. Once the bull is gone, the beggar will fall with it. He will be nothing again." The men moved through the darkness, their torches hidden, their steps careful. Matteo was half asleep against the fence when the sound of snapping branches woke him. His heart clenched. He rose quickly, his eyes darting toward the open field. Figures shifted in the shadows, circling the bull. The animal lifted its head, nostrils flaring. A low rumble vibrated from its chest, deep and warning. "Now!" Elias hissed. A spear whistled through the air. It struck the bull's flank, but instead of falling, the beast roared and charged. The ground shook beneath its hooves, a thunderous rhythm that sent fear crawling up the spines of the attackers. The first man it reached was hurled aside like straw, his weapon clattering uselessly to the dirt. "Hold him!" another shouted, but his words were drowned by the bull's bellow. The men swung blades and hurled spears, yet the beast moved with a power beyond their courage. One by one they faltered, stumbling backward, fear widening their eyes. Matteo ran forward, his voice breaking with desperation. "Stop! Leave him!" His cry carried not just fear but fury, echoing through the night. He grabbed at one of the men's arms, pulling him back before the bull could strike. The man tore away and fled, his face pale as ash. Elias stood his ground longer than the rest, his pride chaining him even as terror gnawed at his heart. He lifted a dagger, his hand trembling. The bull turned, its dark eyes locking onto him. For a moment, everything stilled. The night, the air, even Matteo's breath. Then the beast lunged. Elias tried to move, but too late. The bull's horn grazed his side, tearing cloth and flesh alike. He screamed, collapsing onto the ground, his dagger slipping from his grip. Pain twisted his face as he crawled backward, dirt clinging to his hands. "Help me!" he gasped to the men who remained. But they were already gone, their footsteps fading into the darkness, leaving him alone in the field. The bull stopped, its massive body towering above him, its breath hot and heavy. It could have ended him in that moment, but instead it snorted and turned away, returning to Matteo's side. The message was clear. It was not a killer. It was a guardian. By dawn, the story had spread. The hired men, their fear too great to silence, told of the night the bull had driven them back with raw fury. They told of Elias's fall, his pride torn as cruelly as his flesh. The townspeople listened with wide eyes, and in their voices Matteo's name carried no longer the tone of suspicion, but of awe. They no longer saw a beggar. They saw a man chosen by fate, a man whose bond with the beast had humbled arrogance itself. Farmers brought their sons to see him, pointing with reverence. Elders nodded with respect, their whispers soft with wonder. Even those who had once feared him now crossed themselves not out of dread, but out of respect for a force greater than themselves. Elias, wounded and broken, withdrew from the streets. His wealth could not protect him, his rumors could not save him. And as he hid behind the walls of his house, San Cordillo itself began to change. The arena, once filled with cheers for blood, grew silent. Men no longer gathered at its gates. The sand inside remained unstained, the wooden gates left to rot. In time, it was abandoned altogether, its stands crumbling, its purpose forgotten. Where cruelty had once been spectacle, there now stood a field where Mateo and the bull walked freely, side by side. The sight became a lesson in itself, that strength was not measured by wealth or force, but by the bond of respect. Children who once dreamed of being matadors now dreamed of walking with the bull. Farmers who once fought their herds now sought to understand them. And in the heart of it all stood Mateo, the man who had been nothing but a beggar, now the symbol of San Cordillo's change. The story of him spread beyond the town, carried by travelers, retold by merchants, reshaped into legend. But for those who lived in San Cordillo, the truth was simpler. They had seen it with their own eyes. And so, the man once scorned became the symbol of San Cordillo's change, forever remembered as the beggar who was followed by the bull instead of the millionaire. Disclaimer: the story you just watched is fictional. It explores powerful themes of empathy, social injustice, and the profound unspoken connections between a human and an animal. This narrative aims to highlight that true worth transcends material possessions, and that compassion can be found in the most unlikely of places.